Two big films released over the weekend, Emraan Hashmi's Awarapan 2 and Sunny Deol's Batwara 1947, and honestly there's a lot to talk about each of them. Awarapan 2 has been 19 years in the making, and over that time the original has built this quiet, devoted cult following, mostly on the back of its music and Emraan Hashmi's performance as a man who never really got to choose his own life.
इस बार या तो ये आवारापन खत्म होगा या मैं।
And Batwara 1947 is a reunion of director Rajkumar Santoshi and Sunny Deol after 30 years, with Amir Khan producing, a partition drama that's clearly aiming to cash in on the Independence Day weekend. Two very different films, two very different goals. I'm not going to be making any comparisons between them. As I said in my trailer review of Awarapan 2, I watched that movie first and watched Batwara 1947 after that, and I'll do the reviews in that order. Stick around till the end and I'll tell you honestly what worked, what didn't work, so you can decide for yourself. But before I begin, thanks for all the love you have given to the first podcast of the channel. Talking to Prem from Filmy was an enlightening experience, and I hope to continue that in the future. Let's get started with Awarapan 2. When Awarapan released in 2007, it was a disaster. The music was good, even by the standards back then, it was really good. Tracks like To Fir Aao and Tera Mera Rishta were chart-buster numbers, and over the years, the movie turned into a cult favorite, mostly because of the music and Emraan Hashmi's performance. So this sequel, arriving 19 years later, isn't really up against a plot, it's up against a memory, and memories don't get lost that easy. So I walked into the theatre with just one question: can a movie that only exists because people miss the old one actually stand on its own? And the answer that came out was a lot messier than a simple yes or no. The story of Awarapan 2 is pretty simple. Emraan Hashmi's character Shivam Pandit survived. 19 years later, he's not the same broken man from the first film. Grief made him quieter, not harder. He's built a small, calm life for himself. Somewhere in that life, he takes in a child. When that bond gets threatened, the old Shivam comes back. The one who doesn't back down, doesn't negotiate, doesn't walk away clean. Going in, I expected the worst kind of cash grab sequel, but this film doesn't just replay Shivam's old heartbreak and call it a story, it gives something new to lose, and that becomes the core of the story. It also doesn't waste your time explaining the 20-year gap. No long flashback, no recap. It trusts you to remember, or at least to keep up. For a film that runs on mood, that's the right call. The original Awarapan wasn't a perfect film. The crime story was pretty basic, underworld stuff. What made it stick was the feel of it. A man who never got to choose his own life, shot in a rough, sincere way that stood out from the shinier Bollywood of that time, with music that made heartbreak feel real instead of staged. That's hard to copy. You can't just hire the same composer and expect the same magic. But Mithun, along with Jeet Ganguly, Amal Malik and Akhil Sachdev, came pretty close. So did the sequel get what made the first one special? Mostly, yes. Shivam hasn't been turned into a crowd-pleasing action hero. That was my biggest fear going in. He doesn't crack jokes, he isn't fixed, he isn't dressed up for a generation that wants one-liners. Imran Hashmi plays him with the same weight he had back in 2007, just carrying it differently, like an older man's version of the same pain. That's the strongest thread connecting the film to the original, and you can't fake that kind of thing.
बात तो सही है।
Where it starts to feel different, and long-time fans will notice this fast, is the scale. The sequel is shot across several countries. It's glossy, big budget, clearly built to earn back what it cost. A film with this kind of money behind it can't pretend to be scrappy, but it does mean you are not watching the same film in a new decade. Some of the roughness that made the original feel real got polished away, and on more than one occasion you will miss the original. The music at least doesn't try to beat the original, it leans on it. The reworked versions of the old songs show up right when you want them to. If those tunes are tied to some memory of your own, they will do exactly what they are meant to do. Pure addictive nostalgia. Now coming to what worked. Emraan Hashmi is the biggest USP of the movie, and it's good to see how he has evolved as an actor in the last 2 decades. He isn't acting loud, in fact it's quieter. In more than one scene he holds that stillness for a second too long, and it works. The scenes where the film just lets him sit with grief without rushing him to the next plot point are the best scenes in the movie. If you loved him in the original, this alone is worth the ticket. The mood of the sequel holds up better than I expected. Awarapan was never really about its plot. Nobody remembers the crime story from the first one. What people do remember is a feeling, sadness with danger sitting right underneath it. The sequel finds that same feeling in its quiet moments where the film slows down instead of rushing to the next action sequence. Those are the parts where you can tell the director Nitin Kakkad understood what people loved about the original. The music, as I mentioned earlier, is good and it earns its place in the pluses category. And a couple of the action sequences genuinely work. There's a chase in particular that's tied to the actual story, not just there to look good in a promo. When the action serves the story instead of stopping it, the film is at its best.
कितनी हसीन शक्ल है, मौत से मिलने का शौक है तुम्हें?
This brings us to what didn't work, and for me, it was the villain. A story like this needs you to actually fear for the hero. That only works if the guy on the other side feels dangerous. Hashmi is doing everything he can on his end, but he is basically fighting a shadow. The tension of the whole film pays the price for it. I'll also be honest, a lot of the plot goes exactly where you would guess, not the emotional side, which has some real feeling in it. I mean the actual mechanics of how the conflict builds and wraps up. If you have watched even a few Hindi action movies, you would be a step ahead for long stretches of the movie. It's not trying to surprise you, it's trying to give you something familiar and comfortable, which can make you ask the question, why the need to make a sequel? Shabana Azmi deserved better than what she gets here. She's an actor who can do so much with so little, and the film doesn't just ask her for much. A few of the other supporting roles have the same problem. They are there to push the story forward, not to feel like real people. The runtime doesn't help either. At around 2 hours and 20 minutes, it drags in places, especially in the middle part, where the film seems to repeat a feeling it's already given you instead of building on it. Trim 15 or 20 minutes and it might have hit you harder. And then there is a mix of tones. Old school melodrama, modern action pacing, and quiet character moments are three very different things to juggle. The film doesn't always switch between them smoothly. A few times it felt like the movie was changing gears rather than moving naturally from one mood to the next. So what's my final take on Awarapan 2? Take away the nostalgia and you have got a decent, sometimes predictable action drama. The kind of film you would shrug and call fine if it had no history behind it. It's got Emraan Hashmi stepping back into a role he clearly never fully let go of, and that performance lifts the film well above what the script alone earns. The music does what memory always does. It doesn't need to convince you of anything. It just needs to remind you, and it does it well. If you have never seen the original, you'll probably walk out thinking it was a decent, slightly long watch carried by a strong lead. If you have seen the original, if those songs mean something to you, if you are one of those people who found this film years after it flopped and fell for it anyway, you'll probably walk out more forgiving than the film really deserves. That's just what nostalgia does, and this film knows it. It leans on it more than it probably should, which brings us to the question, could there be another sequel? Given where things stand by the end, sure, there is room for one more. But the actual question is, and I would have to say, no, there isn't really a need for a sequel. Even though early buzz on this has been strong enough that I wouldn't rule out a third film if the box office holds up for the next few weeks, but from a storytelling perspective, I would say, Emraan Hashmi, let's just move on from this one.
मौत मेरा उससे एक पुराना रिश्ता है, एक कर्ज है जो मुझे चुकाना है.
Now let's talk about the other film sharing the weekend with it, because it's playing a completely different game. Batwara 1947. If Awarapan 2 is about one man's private grief, Batwara 1947 goes for something much bigger. This is Rajkumar Santoshi taking on the Partition of India, with Sunny Deol front and center and Amir Khan producing.
पंगा लेना है? इरादा तो नहीं, पर इतराज भी नहीं है.
Based on a well-known Punjabi play, the setup pulls you in fast. A wealthy Muslim family from Meerut, led by Sikandar Mirza, has to flee from Lahore on one of the bloodiest nights of partition. They lose almost everything. Months later, they are given a house to live in, but when they move in, they find an elderly Hindu woman named Mai already living upstairs. She refuses to leave. She's waiting for her own family to come back for her. That's the whole engine of the film right there, and it's genuinely a strong idea. Two people from opposite sides of a freshly drawn border, forced to share one roof at the exact moment history is telling them to hate each other. You don't need a complicated plot where the premise itself carries that much weight. It sets up a real question. Can two people build something like a family out of circumstances built entirely on loss? That's the hook that doesn't need a trailer full of explosions to work. It just needs two good actors in a room, and thankfully that's exactly what it gets. Without giving too much away, the Mirza family slowly starts treating Mai like she's their own mother. They celebrate her festivals with her, they cook her food. It's a small act, but in the world the film is building, small acts of kindness across religious lines are dangerous. The community around them doesn't like it. That tension between one family's quiet decency and the larger world's need to pick a side becomes the real story here, more than any single plot twist, and ask a simple question. What do ordinary people owe each other when the world tells them they are supposed to be enemies? That's a bigger, more honest question than most partition dramas bother asking. And for a good chunk of the runtime, the film handles it with real care. Shabana Azmi is the real reason to watch this film. I'll say that plainly. Her performance as Mai is the strongest thing in the movie by a wide margin. She plays grief and stubbornness and quiet dignity all at once without ever tipping into melodrama. Every scene she's in gets better the moment she's on screen. And there are stretches where you almost forget anyone else is in the film. Sunny Deol also does something here I wasn't expecting. For most part of the runtime, he plays Sikandar Mirza, restrained, quiet. He lets the pain sit on his face instead of shouting it out, which is not something people usually associate with him. You can feel the affection his character has for Mai without a single big speech selling it to you. The film also isn't afraid to sit with uncomfortable silences. There are scenes built entirely around what people don't want to say to each other, and those land harder than a lot of dialogue does. A.R. Rahman's score backs those moments without ever pushing too hard, which is exactly what a film needs. It's not there to tell you how to feel. It sits there underneath the scene and lets it breathe. Preeti Zinta is alright, playing Sikandar's wife with warmth that never feels forced. Ali Fazal in a supporting role is also good, plays his part pretty well. And this brings us to what didn't work, and frankly there is a lot more here to talk about.
और तू मेरे बाप को नहीं जानता, वो ना घर देखेंगे ना सरहद, सीधा घुस के मारेंगे.
Every time the film settles into that quiet, restrained register, it eventually snaps back into old habits. Sunny Deol has spent a chunk of his career playing the kind of hero who solves problems with a raised hand pump and a loud voice, and every so often this film can't resist giving him one of those moments. When it happens, it undoes a lot of that careful, quiet work the film just spent 20 minutes building. It's jarring. You go from a subtle character study to a scene that feels like it wandered in from a completely different movie. The film also struggles with pace. There are stretches, especially in the middle, where the storytelling gets genuinely dull. Scenes repeat their point instead of moving forward, and the film seems so eager to make sure you understand its message that it forgets to trust you to get there yourself. The villain, played by Abhimanyu Singh, is fairly one note. He exists mostly to represent hatred in the abstract rather than as a real specific threat, and that flattens some of the tension in the back half. Karan Deol, playing the son, also isn't quite at the level of the actors around him yet. He has a few good moments, but mostly he's overshadowed by everyone sharing the screen with him. And there's a broader issue worth naming honestly. The film sometimes steps from telling a human story into delivering a message, underlining its own point so hard that it starts to feel more like a lesson than actually a story, and the partition story becomes weaker as a premise for the entire movie. Frankly, when this film is good, it's genuinely moving. The core of it, two people from two different worlds finding something like family in the middle of history's worst moment, is strong enough to carry real weight, and Shabana Azmi in particular makes sure you feel every bit of it. Sunny Deol shows a side of himself that's worth seeing, even if the film doesn't always let him stay there. But it's a film pulled in two directions. Part of it wants to be quiet, honest human drama. Part of it wants to be a loud, crowd-pleasing Sunny Deol vehicle with a message stamped across the end credits. It never fully decides which film it wants to be, and that indecision is the core of the problem.
वो माँ है, माँ को हिंदू मुसलमान में ना बांटिए. माँ अपने आप में एक मजहब है. हर इंसान का पहला मजहब माँ है. हर बच्चे के मुंह से निकला पहला लफ्ज माँ है.
Which brings us to the final verdict. Which one do you watch? If you are choosing between the two this weekend, here's my honest read. If you want a safer, more comfortable watch, listen to good songs, breathe in all the nostalgia moments, watch Awarapan 2. If you're okay with all the excessive loudness and over-the-top action moments and are okay with a movie unsure of what it actually wants to be, then watch Batwara 1947.
You're goddamn right.
That's my take on the 2 movies that were released over the weekend. Let me know in the comments which movie you are planning to watch first. Subscribe if you haven't already and check out my podcast with Filmy Prem right here. Thanks for watching and I'll see you in the next one.